The drought had been merciless that summer of 1889. From where Asa Callahan stood on the ridge overlooking his ranch, the valley stretched out before him like a great brown scar across the earth. The grass, once green and sweet, had turned to brittle straw that crumbled beneath his boots. In the distance, the Sierra Nevada mountains rose sharp against the cloudless sky, their peaks holding snow that refused to melt and flow down to the parched lands below. Asa removed his weathered hat and wiped the sweat from his brow with a dusty sleeve. 3 years since Martha had passed, and the land seemed to be dying right along with his memories of her. The creek that had once run clear and cold through the property was now nothing but a muddy trickle. His cattle, what remained of them, stood listless in whatever shade they could find, their ribs showing through their hides like the slats of a broken fence. He made his way down the slope toward the main house, a modest 2-story structure his father had built with his own hands 40 years prior. The wood had weathered to a silver gray, and the porch sagged slightly on the eastern side where the foundation had settled. Inside, the house felt hollow, too quiet, filled with shadows that seemed to grow longer with each passing day. At the kitchen table, Asa spread out the papers that had arrived from the bank that morning. The numbers swam before his tired eyes, but their meaning was clear enough. 3 months behind on the loan payments. The letterhead bore the name of Horace Pike, president of the Millbrook Savings and Loan. Pike was a man who wore his prosperity like a badge, his belly straining against silk vests while half the ranchers in the valley struggled to put food on their tables. Asa poured himself 2 fingers of whiskey and stared out the window at the dying light. Tomorrow he would have to put down another cow, maybe 2. The meat would keep him fed for a while, but it was like eating his future 1 meal at a time. A knock came at the door just as he was preparing to head up to bed. It was Samuel Hayes, his nearest neighbor, a man whose own ranch was faring little better. "Evening, Asa," Samuel said, hat in hand. "Thought you should know. There's been talk in town." "There's always talk in town," Asa replied, but he stepped aside to let the man in. Samuel declined the offered whiskey with a shake of his head. "This is different. That widow woman, the one living up at the old Morrison place in the canyon. Folks are saying things." Sarah Lynn. Asa knew the name, though he'd never met the woman. She'd arrived about a year ago, taking up residence in a cabin that had been empty since Jack Morrison was shot dead in a dispute over stolen horses. "That's the one. Margie Fitzgerald swears she saw strange lights up there at night. And Tom Bradley's boy claims he heard chanting when he was hunting rabbits near the creek." Asa fought the urge to roll his eyes. "Since when do you listen to gossip, Sam?" "Since that woman's late husband was thick with the Coulter gang. You remember what they did to the Hendricks family?" The memory was still fresh. A family of 5 burned out of their home. The father shot dead trying to defend his property, but that had been 2 years ago, and the Coulter gang had been run out of the territory by federal marshals. "The woman can't help who her husband was," Asa said quietly. Samuel stood to leave, pausing at the door. "Just thought you should know. People are scared. Asa, scared people do foolish things." After Samuel left, Asa sat in the darkness for a long while, nursing his whiskey. Outside, coyotes began their nightly chorus, their voices carrying across the empty land like the cries of lost souls. The storm came 3 nights later, unexpected and violent. Lightning split the sky while thunder rolled through the valley like cannon fire. Asa had just finished securing the barn doors when he heard it, a pounding at his front door, urgent and desperate. He opened it to find a woman standing in the rain, soaked through to the skin. She was younger than he'd expected, maybe 30, with dark hair plastered to her head and eyes the color of storm clouds. In her arms, she clutched a scraggly cat that looked half drowned. "Please," she said, her voice barely audible above the rain. "I need someone to believe me." For a moment, Asa just stared. This was her, the widow everyone whispered about, Sarah Lynn Morrison. Up close, she didn't look like a witch or a criminal's wife. She looked tired, frightened, and utterly alone. "You'd better come in," he said finally. Stepping aside, She hesitated on the threshold, water pooling at her feet. I wouldn't ask, but there's nowhere else. They burned my chicken coop, killed them all. Said next time it would be the house. Asa's jaw tightened. Whatever people thought of this woman, destroying her property and livestock crossed a line. Who did this? Does it matter? She laughed, but there was no humor in it. Everyone wants me gone. He led her to the kitchen, stoking the fire in the stove while she stood shivering by the door, still holding the bedraggled cat. Asa found an old blanket and handed it to her, careful not to let their fingers touch. You can dry off by the fire. I'll make some coffee. As he worked, he studied her from the corner of his eye. Her dress, once blue, was patched in several places. Her boots were men's boots, too large for her feet. But there was something in the way she held herself, a stubborn dignity that reminded him of Martha in her final days, refusing to bend even as the illness consumed her. "Why did you come here?" he asked, setting a cup before her. She wrapped her hands around it gratefully. "Samuel Hayes said you were a fair man, said you judge people by their actions, not their histories." Sam said that? No. A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "But he didn't need to. I can tell by how he speaks of you." The storm raged outside, but inside the kitchen, a strange calm settled. The cat, freed from her arms, investigated the corners of the room with typical feline curiosity. "I'll bed down in the barn," Sarah said after finishing her coffee. "I'll be gone at first light." "You'll do no such thing. There's a room upstairs. Used to be my wife's sewing room. It's got a bed and a lock on the door if that makes you feel safer." She looked at him then, really looked at him, and Asa felt something shift in his chest. It had been so long since anyone had looked at him as anything other than poor widower Callahan, the man who couldn't save his ranch or his wife. "Why?" she asked simply. Asa considered the question. Why was he helping her? Maybe it was just basic decency. Maybe it was the memory of Martha, who would have been appalled at the thought of turning away someone in need. Or maybe it was something in this woman's eyes, a recognition of shared grief, of understanding what it meant to be utterly alone. "Because," he said finally, "everyone deserves shelter from the storm." She stood slowly, gathering the now purring cat. At the foot of the stairs, she paused. "They're not wrong about me. You know, my husband was a bad man. Some of that shadow follows me still." "We all got shadows," Asa replied. "Question is whether we let them define us." She climbed the stairs without another word. Asa heard the door close, the lock turn. He poured himself another whiskey and settled into his chair by the window, watching the lightning illuminate the valley in brief, violent moments of clarity. Come morning, she would leave, and life would return to its slow decline toward inevitable loss. But for tonight, at least, his house didn't feel quite so empty. And that, Asa thought as thunder shook the windows, was both a dangerous and wonderful thing. Morning came with a pale sun that did little to warm the rain-soaked earth. Asa woke to find Sarah already in the kitchen, the stove fired up and coffee brewing. She'd tidied the room and was mending a tear in her sleeve with the neat, precise stitches. "I hope you don't mind," she said without looking up. "Old habits. My husband never liked idle hands." Asa poured himself coffee, studying her in the morning light. The shadows under her eyes spoke of a sleepless night, but her hands were steady on the needle. "You planning on staying?" "That wasn't our agreement." She tied off the thread and examined her work. "I'll be on my way once I've helped with the morning chores. It's the least I can do." He wanted to tell her she owed him nothing, but something in her tone suggested she needed to repay the debt, needed to feel useful. So he nodded and led her out to the barn where the surviving cattle waited for their meager ration of hay. Sarah worked without complaint, mucking stalls and hauling water. She had a way with the animals, speaking to them in low, soothing tones that reminded Asa of how Martha used to gentle the horses. When she thought he wasn't looking, she'd stroke their faces with surprising tenderness. "You know your way around livestock," he observed. "I grew up on a farm in Missouri. Before," she trailed off, focusing on spreading fresh straw. They worked in companionable silence until the sun climbed higher. Asa was preparing to suggest breakfast when he spotted a rider approaching from the direction of town. His stomach tightened as he recognized Tom Garrett, owner of the general store and one of the town's most persistent gossips. "Get inside," he told Sarah quietly. "No need to fuel more talk." She slipped away without argument, and Asa met Tom at the fence line. "Morning, Asa." Tom's eyes swept the property, clearly looking for something. "Heard you might have had a visitor last night." "Storm brought a lot of things last night," Asa replied evenly. "Lost some shingles off the barn roof." Tom leaned forward in his saddle. "Margie Fitzgerald says she saw that Morrison woman heading this direction. You know she's trouble, don't you? Her husband ran with killers and thieves. Word is she helped hide their stolen goods. Word is a lot of things, Tom. Doesn't make them true. Maybe not, but where there's smoke." Tom straightened, his message delivered. "Just be careful, Asa. You've got enough troubles without adding a woman like that to them." After Tom left, Asa found Sarah standing by the kitchen window, watching the rider disappear over the ridge. "I should go," she said. "I've brought you enough trouble. You've brought me nothing but a clean kitchen and mucked stalls." He paused, weighing his next words. "That offer of work for room and board, it stands if you need it." She turned to face him, surprise clear on her face. "Why would you do that? You heard what he said." "I heard gossip and speculation. What I saw was someone who works hard and knows her way around a ranch." He met her gaze steadily. "I could use the help, and you need a place to stay. Seems straightforward enough." Sarah was quiet for a long moment. "They'll make your life miserable. You know that. My life's already plenty miserable. At least this way the stalls will be clean." That drew a small smile from her, the first genuine one he'd seen. "All right, Mr. Callahan, but I'll earn my keep, and then some. Over the next days." Sarah proved true to her word. She rose before dawn to start the stove, worked alongside him until dark, and retired to her room without complaint. She patched holes in his clothes he hadn't even noticed, organized the chaotic pantry, and coaxed the vegetable garden back to life with careful watering and attention. But it was on a trip to town for supplies that Asa truly saw what she faced. They'd barely made it to the general store when Mrs. Adelaide Perkins, the banker's wife, deliberately crossed the street to avoid them. Tom Garrett served them with cold efficiency, speaking only to state prices. When Sarah reached for a bolt of calico, examining its quality, Harriet Mason actually hissed at her like a cat. "Murderous," someone whispered, though Asa couldn't tell who. Sarah's face went pale, but she kept her chin high. At the feed store, young Billy Curtis spat at her feet. Sarah stepped around the spittle without comment, but Asa saw her hands tremble as she helped load sacks of grain. On the ride home, she finally spoke. "You want to know the truth? Only if you want to tell it." She stared straight ahead, her voice flat. "I was 16 when my father sold me to Jake Morrison. Not in so many words, of course. Called it marriage. Jake paid off his debts, and I got a husband 30 years my senior who treated me like property." Her hands tightened on her skirts. "I lost 3 babies trying to give him the son he wanted. Each time, he blamed me, said I was cursed." Asa's knuckles went white on the reins, but he didn't interrupt. "When Jake got involved with the Coulter gang, I begged him to stop, but the money was too good, and he liked feeling important. Then one night, they brought a wounded man to our house. Jake was gone, and I was alone. The man—" She paused, swallowing hard. "He decided he was owed some entertainment for his troubles. I shot him with Jake's pistol. Didn't kill him, but wounded him bad enough that he couldn't finish what he started." "Good," Asa said firmly. "The gang blamed me when their man died from infection weeks later. Jake beat me so badly I couldn't leave bed for a month. Said I'd ruined everything. 2 months later, federal marshals shot Jake in a raid." She turned to look at him then. "So yes, I'm the widow of an outlaw. Yes, I shot a man. And yes, I was glad when Jake died. Does that make me what they say I am?" Asa pulled the wagon to a stop. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the road. And somewhere a meadowlark was singing. Makes you a survivor, he said quietly. Nothing more, nothing less. Sarah's composure finally cracked. She pressed a hand to her mouth, shoulders shaking with suppressed sobs. Without thinking, Asa reached over and covered her other hand with his own. She didn't pull away. That evening, as a cold rain began to fall, they sat together on the porch, sharing a bottle of whiskey Asa had been saving. Sarah hummed softly, a melody that tugged at his memory. My wife used to sing that, he said. Called it The Water is Wide. Said her grandmother taught it to her. Sarah smiled sadly. My mother sang it too. Said it was about longing for something you could never reach. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the rain paint dark patterns on the dry earth. The whiskey warmed Asa's chest, but it was Sarah's presence that eased the constant ache he'd carried since Martha's death. I dream about them sometimes, Sarah said suddenly. The babies I lost. Wonder what they would have looked like, who they might have become. I dream about Martha, Asa admitted. Keep thinking I'll wake up and she'll be there, telling me I overslept again. Sarah shifted slightly, her shoulder brushing his. Does it ever get easier? No, he said honestly, but maybe it gets more bearable when you're not facing it alone. She turned to look at him then, her eyes searching his face. The lamplight from inside caught the amber flecks in her gray eyes, and Asa found himself noticing the curve of her neck, the way her hair curled slightly at her temples where the rain had touched it. Slowly, as if afraid she might startle him, Sarah placed her hand on his knee. The touch was light, hesitant, but it sent a jolt through him like lightning. He covered her hand with his own, feeling the calluses that matched his own, the strength in those slender fingers. Asa, she whispered, and his name on her lips was like a prayer. He leaned closer, drawn by something stronger than reason or propriety. Her breath was warm against his face, scented with whiskey and something uniquely her, but just as their lips might have met, a crack of thunder split the night, breaking the spell. Sarah pulled back, color high on her cheeks. The mending. She fled inside, leaving Asa alone with the rain and the echo of possibilities. He remained on the porch long into the night, wondering if he was a fool for wanting something that could only bring more pain, or if perhaps, just perhaps, two broken souls might find a way to be whole again together. The crisis came with the morning post. Asa stared at the official notice, the words swimming before his eyes. The neighboring ranch owned by Clayton Marsh had secured water rights to the creek that fed both properties. Without that water, Asa's cattle wouldn't survive another month. It doesn't make sense, he muttered, spreading the papers on the kitchen table. That creek has been shared for 40 years. Sarah read over his shoulder, her presence a comfort he'd grown accustomed to in the weeks since that night on the porch. They'd been careful since then, maintaining a respectful distance, though awareness hummed between them like a taut wire. Money, she said simply. Clayton Marsh has it, and you don't. In times like these, that's all that matters. Asa slammed his fist on the table, making the coffee cups jump. There has to be another way, maybe upstream, in the mountain. Sarah was quiet for a moment, then spoke carefully. There is another way. Jake used to talk about it, an old Indian trail that leads to a spring, hidden in the rocks, about 2 days' ride into the mountains. You know where it is? I think so. Jake took me there once, when he was meeting with... She trailed off. It doesn't matter. I remember the landmarks. Asa studied her face. A journey into the mountains meant time alone together, away from prying eyes and wagging tongues. It also meant trusting her completely. It could be dangerous. So is dying of thirst, she replied with a wry smile. They set out at dawn 3 days later, having prepared quietly to avoid attracting attention. Asa led a pack horse loaded with supplies, while Sarah rode the gentle mare he'd been training. She sat the horse well, he noticed, with the natural grace of someone who'd grown up riding. The first day took them through familiar territory, following deer trails up into the foothills. They spoke little, concentrating on the increasingly difficult terrain. By late afternoon, they'd climbed high enough that the valley spread below them like a faded quilt, the ranch just a speck among many. As darkness approached, Asa found a sheltered spot among a cluster of boulders. A natural overhang provided protection on 3 sides, and a small clearing offered space for their bedrolls. He tended the horses while Sarah gathered wood for a fire, working with the easy rhythm of partnership they'd developed. Over a simple meal of beans and biscuit, Sarah pointed to distant peaks glowing pink in the sunset. Jake said the old-timers called those the Devil's Teeth. The spring is just beyond, in a canyon shaped like a horseshoe. You sure you can find it? I remember being terrified, she admitted. The path was so narrow, and Jake kept pushing ahead like the devil was after him. I memorized every rock, every turn, certain I'd need to find my way back alone if he got us killed. The temperature dropped rapidly once the sun set. They sat close to the fire, shoulders almost touching, watching sparks rise into the star-filled sky. Tell me about Martha, Sarah said suddenly, if it's not too painful. Asa was surprised by the request, but found himself wanting to share. She was brightness, even when things were hard. She found reasons to laugh, used to dance in the kitchen while cooking. Didn't matter if there was music or not. He smiled at the memory. She would have liked you. You think so? You're both strong in that quiet way. Both see the good in things others overlook. He glanced at her. She would have taken one look at you and declared you needed feeding up and looking after. Sarah laughed softly. She sounds wonderful. She was dying for 2 years before the end. Asa said quietly. Some wasting disease the doctor couldn't name. I watched her fade away bit by bit, and there wasn't a damn thing I could do about it. Sarah's hand found his in the darkness. You stayed with her. That's not nothing. They sat in silence, hands clasped, until the fire burned low. When Sarah shivered, Asa fetched their bedrolls, laying them near the dying embers. The space was small, forcing them to lie close together. He could hear her breathing, feel the warmth radiating from her body. I lost the last baby just 6 months before Jake died, Sarah whispered into the darkness. I was so far along, I'd felt it move. When I lost it, something in me broke. I think Jake saw it too. Maybe that's why he got more reckless with the gang, like we were both racing toward an ending. Asa turned toward her, though he could barely see her face in the darkness. I'm sorry. The night you asked if it gets easier, I lied. It does. A little. When you're with someone who understands. Snow began to fall as they climbed higher the next morning, fat flakes that clung to their clothes and the horses' manes. The trail narrowed until they had to dismount and lead the horses, picking their way along a ledge with a sheer drop to one side. There, Sarah pointed to a formation ahead. Those rocks that look like a church steeple. The canyon is just beyond. But as they rounded the formation, Asa's heart sank. A rock slide had blocked the entrance to the canyon, tons of granite sealing it like a tomb. No, Sarah breathed, staring at the barrier. It was here. The spring was just inside. They spent an hour searching for another way in, but the canyon walls were sheer and impassable. The snow fell heavier now, and the horses stamped nervously. We need to find shelter, Asa said. This storm's getting worse. Sarah looked stricken. I was so certain. I've failed you. You haven't failed anything, he said firmly. Come on. He remembered passing a shallow cave a mile back, and they retraced their steps through the thickening snow. The cave was little more than a deep depression in the rock face, but it was dry and out of the wind. They crowded inside with the horses, the animals' body heat helping warm the space. As darkness fell, the storm became a blizzard. Snow piled at the cave entrance, sealing them in a world of stone and shadow. They huddled together under both blankets, sharing warmth as the temperature plummeted. We might die here, Sarah said matter-of-factly. We might, Asa agreed. Though I've survived worse storms, if we do. She turned in his arms to face him. I want you to know these past weeks have been the happiest I've had in years. You made me feel human again. He could feel her breath on his face, see the glimmer of her eyes in the darkness. Sarah? No, she whispered. Let me say this. I know I'm not Martha. I know I come with shadows and shame, but I care for you, Asa, more than I have any right to. His control, held so carefully these past weeks, finally broke. He pulled her against him, capturing her mouth with his own. The kiss was desperate, hungry, full of loneliness and need and something that might have been hope. She responded with equal fervor, her hands tangling in his hair. When they broke apart, both were breathing hard. You're not Martha, he said roughly. You're Sarah, and that's who I want. She made a sound somewhere between a sob and a laugh, then kissed him again. This time it was slower, deeper, a conversation without words. Outside, the wind howled and the snow fell, but in their small sanctuary, there was only warmth and connection. They lay entwined, foreheads touching, sharing breath and heat. Asa's hand traced the line of her jaw, marveling at the softness of her skin. I thought I'd forgotten how to feel this, he admitted. So did I. She pressed closer, her body fitting against his like she belonged there. Maybe we're not so broken after all. They didn't sleep that night, but held each other and talked in whispers about dreams deferred and losses endured, about the people they'd been and who they might yet become. When Sarah spoke of the child she'd lost, he held her while she wept. When he described Martha's final days, she stroked his hair and listened. As dawn light filtered into the cave, the storm had passed. They emerged to find a world transformed by snow, pristine and glittering in the morning sun. The horses nickered softly, eager for movement. Look, Sarah pointed to a trickle of water running from beneath the rock slide. The spring. It's found another way out. They followed the tiny stream down the slope until it joined with another. Then another. By midday, they'd discovered a pool fed by multiple springs, enough water to sustain the ranch through any drought. You did it, Asa said, pulling her close. You saved us. We saved each other, she corrected, and kissed him there in the snow and sunlight. Two souls no longer alone against the wilderness. The journey home took on a different quality. Where before there had been careful distance, now there were shared smiles, casual touches, the comfort of acknowledged feeling. They camped again that night, but this time they shared a bedroll without pretense, finding solace in each other's arms. What happens when we get back? Sarah asked as they lay watching the stars. We face it together. Asa said simply, whatever comes. She was quiet for a moment. They won't understand. They'll make it ugly. Let them try. He pressed a kiss to her temple. I'm not letting you go. Sarah, not for them, not for anyone. She turned in his arms, and in the starlight he could see tears on her cheeks. Promise? I promise, he said, and sealed it with a kiss that tasted of hope and new beginnings. The trouble started before they'd even finished unloading the horses. Samuel Hayes was waiting at the ranch, his face grim beneath the brim of his hat. Asa, we need to talk. His eyes flicked to Sarah, who was leading the mare to the barn. Alone. Whatever you have to say, you can say in front of Miss Morrison, Asa replied, deliberately using her formal name despite the intimacy they'd shared in the mountains. Samuel shifted uncomfortably. Pike's been stirring folks up. Says you're harboring a criminal. There's talk of bringing the sheriff from Carson City. On what charges? Asa kept his voice level, though anger simmered beneath the surface. Conspiracy. They're saying, claiming she helped hide stolen money from the Coulter gang. Samuel looked miserable. I don't believe it, Asa, but Pike's got Judge Thornton's ear, and with your loan situation. The implication was clear. Pike would use any leverage to force Asa off his land. Sarah, having settled the horses, approached them with her chin high despite having heard every word. I'll leave, she said simply. Tonight, you've done enough for me, Mr. Callahan. The hell you will, Asa snapped, then softened his tone. We knew this was coming. We face it together, like we discussed. Samuel looked between them, understanding dawning on his weathered face. Asa, please tell me you haven't. This will only make things worse. I appreciate your concern. Sam, but my personal affairs are just that, personal. After Samuel left, shaking his head, Asa found Sarah in the kitchen, mechanically preparing supper. Her hands trembled as she peeled potatoes. You should reconsider, she said without looking up. Your friend is right. I'm making things worse for you. Asa crossed to her, stilling her hands with his own. Look at me. She raised her eyes, and he saw fear there, not for herself, but for him. Do you trust me? He asked. Yes, but... Then trust that I know what I'm choosing. He cupped her face gently. I spent 3 years dying slowly after Martha passed. You brought me back to life. Sarah, that's worth any fight. The next morning brought a formal notice from the bank. Horace Pike himself delivered it, arriving in a polished buggy with 2 men Asa recognized as hired muscle from the mining camps. 30 days. Callahan, Pike announced, not bothering to dismount, his pale eyes fixed on Sarah, who stood in the doorway. Unless you'd like to discuss alternative arrangements. Such as? Remove your house guest publicly. Make it clear she's no longer welcome on any decent person's property. Pike's smile was cold. Do that, and I might be willing to extend your loan terms. Get off my land, Asa said quietly. Think carefully. Callahan, you're choosing a whore's daughter over your family's legacy. Asa's fist connected with Pike's jaw before he'd even made the conscious decision to swing. The banker tumbled from his buggy into the dust, blood streaming from his nose. His hired men started forward, but Asa already had his rifle in hand. Anyone else want to insult a lady under my protection? They retreated, hauling Pike to his feet. The banker spat blood and pointed a shaking finger. You'll regret this, Callahan. I'll see you ruined and her run out of the territory on a rail. After they left, Sarah emerged from the house, her face pale but determined. You shouldn't have done that. Yes, Asa said, setting down the rifle. I should have. The harassment began in earnest after that. Fences were cut in the night, letting cattle stray. Dead animals appeared on the porch, rabbits with their necks wrung, a coyote with a note pinned to its hide. Next time it won't be animals. Sarah bore it all with quiet dignity, but Asa saw the toll it took. She jumped at unexpected sounds, kept the curtains drawn, rarely ventured beyond the ranch boundaries. At night, she clung to him fiercely, as if afraid he'd vanish come morning. I'm poison, she whispered one night as they lay entwined. Everything I touch turns to ash. No, he said firmly, tilting her chin up. You're the strongest woman I've ever known, and I love you for it. The words hung between them, unexpected and profound. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. You can't mean that, she breathed. I've never meant anything more. He kissed her softly. I love you, Sarah Lynn Morrison, past and all. She broke then, sobbing against his chest while he held her, stroking her hair and murmuring endearments. When the storm passed, she pulled back to look at him, her eyes red but shining. I love you too, she whispered. God help me, I do. They made love then with a tenderness born of shared pain and newfound hope. In the darkness of his bedroom, their bedroom now, Asa traced the marks life had left on her body. A thin scar across her ribs from a broken bottle, the slight hollow of her belly where children had never fully formed. Each mark a story of survival, each touch a promise of healing. Afterward, they lay spent and peaceful, listening to the wind rattling the windows. Sarah traced lazy patterns on his chest, humming that same melody that connected them to lost loves and found hopes. Are you afraid? She asked. Of Pike? No. Of losing everything? Asa considered this. I already lost everything once, survived it, but losing you? He tightened his arms around her. That's the only thing that scares me now. The confrontation came to a head on a Sunday morning. Asa and Sarah had gone to town for supplies, ignoring the hostile stares and whispered curses. They'd just loaded the wagon when a crowd began to gather, led by Adelaide Perkins and Harriet Mason. Shameless, Adelaide hissed. parading your sin before decent folk. The only sin here is your poisoned tongue, Asa replied, helping Sarah onto the wagon seat. The crowd pressed closer, faces ugly with righteous anger. Someone threw a clod of dirt that struck Sarah's shoulder. She flinched but didn't cry out. "We don't want your kind here," Tom Garrett called from his store entrance. "Take your whore and get out." That word again. Asa's hands clenched on the reins, but Sarah laid a gentle hand on his arm. "Are you so afraid of me?" she asked, her voice carrying clearly across the square. "A lone woman with no family, no friends, no one but this good man willing to show Christian charity." "You're no Christian," Harriet spat. "You're a Jezebel, a woman who was sold to a cruel man at 16. Sarah interrupted, standing now in the wagon. "A woman who lost 3 babies and nearly her life trying to be the wife he demanded. A woman who defended herself against assault and was branded a criminal for it." The crowd stirred uneasily. Some faces showed uncertainty now, though others remained hard. "Yes, my husband was an outlaw. Yes, men died because of their choices. But I ask you, which of you would have chosen differently in my place? Which of you would have let that man violate you to keep your reputation clean?" "Sarah," Asa said quietly, but she wasn't finished. "You call me names. You destroy my property. You threaten the one person who's shown me kindness. Why? Because you need someone to blame for your fears, your failures." Her voice rose. "I am not your enemy. I'm just trying to survive. Same as all of you." Silence fell across the square. Then, from the back of the crowd, a woman's voice. "She's right." Heads turned to see Mrs. Chen, the Chinese laundry owner's wife, stepping forward. "I know what it is to be hated for who I am, where I come from. This is wrong." "Now see here," Adelaide began, but other voices interrupted. "The girls had enough troubles," said Walter Schmidt, the German blacksmith. "Leave her be." Not everyone agreed, but doubt had cracked the mob's certainty. They dispersed slowly, shooting dark looks, but no longer unified in their hatred. On the ride home, Sarah leaned against Asa's shoulder. "That was foolish," she said. "That was brave," he corrected. "And I've never been prouder." That night, as cold rain lashed the windows, Sarah asked the question that had haunted her. "What if I told you something worse? Something that could destroy us both?" Asa studied her face in the lamplight. "There's nothing you could tell me that would change how I feel." She took a shuddering breath. "The man I shot, I didn't just wound him. I killed him. Shot him 3 times while he begged for mercy." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "And I'm not sorry. I'd do it again." The confession hung between them like a blade. Asa saw the fear in her eyes, the certainty that this would be the thing that finally drove him away. Instead, he pulled her into his arms. "Good," he said fiercely. "I'm glad you fought back. I'm glad you survived." Sarah broke down completely then, clinging to him as if he were the only solid thing in a world gone mad. They held each other through the storm. 2 damaged souls who'd found in each other not just love, but understanding, the rarest gift of all. "No more secrets," she whispered when she could speak again. "No more secrets." He agreed, and sealed the promise with a kiss that tasted of tears and truth and tomorrow. The summons came on a Tuesday morning, delivered by Sheriff Coleman himself. The lawman looked uncomfortable as he handed Asa the official document. "Town council meeting, special session," Coleman explained, not meeting Asa's eyes. "Pike's pushed for a formal hearing about the situation." Asa scanned the paper. He was being called to answer charges of harboring a person of questionable character, conduct unbecoming a property owner, and disturbing the peace of the community. "Since when is giving someone shelter a crime?" Asa asked. "Since Horace Pike owns half the town council," Coleman replied quietly. He glanced toward the house where Sarah was visible through the window. "If I were you, I'd get a lawyer, maybe consider alternatives." "You mean throw her out?" Coleman sighed. "I mean think about what you're willing to lose. Asa, that's all." After the sheriff left, Asa found Sarah packing her few belongings into a worn carpet bag. Her face was set in rigid lines, but he could see the tremor in her hands. "Absolutely not," he said, taking the bag from her. "You heard him. They'll take your land, destroy your life." She wouldn't look at him. "I won't let that happen. And I won't let you run." He caught her hands, stilling their frantic movement. "We knew this was coming. We stand together. This isn't your fight. The hell it isn't." His voice rose, then softened. "Sarah, look at me, please." She raised her eyes, and he saw the depth of her fear, not for herself, but for him. "If they take the ranch, we'll homestead somewhere else. If they run us out of the territory, we'll go to California, Oregon, anywhere." He cupped her face gently. "But I will not let them drive you away. Not from this land, and not from me." "You'd give up everything?" "I'd give up a patch of dirt and some cattle. That's not everything." He kissed her forehead. "You are everything." The town hall was packed for the special session. It seemed every citizen had turned out to witness the spectacle. Pike sat at the council table, looking smug in his pressed suit. The other council members, merchants and property owners all, avoided looking at Asa directly. "This hearing will come to order," announced Mayor Hutchins, rapping his gavel. "We're here to address complaints regarding the harboring of one Sarah Morrison at the Callahan Ranch. She's my employee." Asa stated clearly, "Hired fairly for honest work." Pike snorted. "Employee? Is that what you call it? Watch your tone, Pike," Asa warned. "Or what? You'll assault me again?" Pike touched his still bruised jaw. "You see, gentlemen, the negative influence is already apparent. Asa Callahan was a respectable man before this woman arrived. Now he brawls in the street like a common thug." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Adelaide Perkins nodded vigorously from the front row. "Furthermore," Pike continued, "there's the matter of Mrs. Morrison's past associations, her late husband's crimes." "Are not her crimes," Asa interrupted, "unless we're prosecuting wives for their husbands' sins now. She was complicit." Pike insisted. "There are witnesses who saw her with known outlaws." "What witnesses?" Asa demanded. "Where are they?" Pike shuffled his papers. "The testimony is confidential. To protect your lies." Sarah's voice rang out from the back of the room. All heads turned. Sarah stood in the doorway, wearing her best dress, the blue one she'd mended that first morning. Her chin was high, but Asa could see the effort it took to maintain her composure. "You have no right to speak here." Pike sputtered. "I have every right to face my accusers," Sarah replied, walking down the center aisle. "Though I see none present, just gossip and speculation dressed up as concern for public welfare." She stopped before the council table. "You want the truth? Here it is. My husband was a criminal. He brought evil men to our home. When one tried to force himself on me, I defended myself. I shot him, and he died." Gasps echoed through the hall. "I reported it to the sheriff in Carson City. He investigated and found it justifiable. I have the documents if you'd like to see them." This was news to Asa. Sarah had never mentioned official exoneration. "Papers can be forged," Pike said. But uncertainty had crept into his voice. "Then wire Carson City. Sheriff Watson will confirm it." Sarah turned to address the crowd. "But that's not really what this is about, is it? You don't care about justice. You care about having someone to blame, someone to fear, someone to make you feel righteous in your comfortable homes." "Now see here," Mayor Hutchins began. "I see clearly." Sarah continued, "I see a banker who wants to foreclose on good people's land. I see merchants who profit from desperation. I see a town so afraid of its own shadows that it would destroy two people whose only crime is caring for each other." "Caring." Adelaide Perkins stood. Her face flushed. "You call your sin caring? I call it love." Sarah said simply, "And if that's a sin, then I'm guilty." The hall erupted. Some shouted condemnation. Others argued for compassion. Through it all, Sarah stood straight and still, a pillar of dignity amid chaos. Asa pushed through to reach her. taking his place at her side. "Enough," he said, his voice carrying over the din. "You want someone to punish. Punish me. I invited her to stay. I employ her. He looked directly at Pike. "Love her and intend to marry her if she'll have me." Sarah's sharp intake of breath was audible even over the crowd's reaction. She turned to stare at him, eyes wide. "You want to take my land for that? Take it." Asa addressed the council now. "But know this. You'll be destroying a man whose family helped build this town, whose father fought Indians and drought to make this valley livable, all because I offered shelter to a woman in need and had the audacity to fall in love." The council huddled in whispered conference. Mayor Hutchins looked deeply uncomfortable. "Finally." He rapped his gavel again. "The council finds no legal grounds for action. Miss Morrison has broken no laws. Mr. Callahan is free to employ whomever he chooses." He paused, then added reluctantly, "However, the matter of the outstanding loan remains between Mr. Callahan and the bank." Pike's face went purple. "This is not over," he hissed. As the crowd dispersed, some shooting hostile glares, while others nodded with what might have been respect, Sarah gripped Asa's arm. "Did you mean it?" she whispered. "About marriage?" "Every word." He covered her hand with his. "Though I'd planned to ask more privately. The answer would be the same either way." She smiled through tears. "Yes, Asa, yes." They left the hall together, heads high despite the whispers following them. On the street, Mrs. Chen approached hesitantly. "Miss Morrison," she said in accented English. "You very brave, like warrior woman from old stories." "Just desperate," Sarah replied, but she squeezed the woman's offered hand gratefully. Others approached as they loaded the wagon. Walter Schmidt offering a discount on horseshoes. Doc Pritchard's wife quietly promising her midwife services. When the time comes. Not everyone, not even most, but enough to show that Sarah's words had found some fertile ground. The ride home was quiet, both processing the morning's events. As they reached the ranch, Sarah finally spoke. "You defended me publicly, declared your intentions before the whole town." She turned to face him. "Do you understand what you've done? There's no going back now." "I don't want to go back." Asa helped her down from the wagon, keeping her hands in his. "I want to go forward, with you." That night, as they lay together, Sarah traced the lines of his face in the moonlight. "I never thought I'd have this," she murmured. "A good man's love, a chance at a real life. You deserve all that and more," Asa replied, catching her hand and kissing her palm. "I need to tell you something," she said. "About the papers from Carson City. I do have them, but Sheriff Watson was my mother's cousin. He helped me because of family, not because he believed me. Does it matter? You told the truth about what happened. It matters that there are still no secrets between us." She pressed closer to him. "I've been terrified you'd learn something that would make you stop loving me." "Never," he said fiercely, rolling to pin her beneath him. "There is nothing that could make me stop loving you." She pulled him down for a kiss that was desperate and sweet at once. They made love slowly, savoring each touch, each whispered endearment. Afterward, as Sarah dozed against his chest, Asa stared at the ceiling and made his own vow. He would find a way to save the ranch, not for his father's legacy or his own pride, but for Sarah, for the life they could build together, for the children they might have, who would grow up knowing they were wanted and loved. In the darkness, with Sarah warm in his arms, Asa Callahan began to plan. Pike thought he held all the cards, but Asa had something more powerful than money or influence. He had something worth fighting for. The foreclosure notice arrived with 10 days remaining. Asa spread it on the kitchen table, the weight of inevitability pressing down on his shoulders. $3,000. Might as well have been $3 million. "We'll sell the cattle," Sarah said, reading over his shoulder. "All of them. Already calculated it. Even if we got top price, which we won't in this drought, we'd still be 800 short." Sarah was quiet for a moment, then disappeared upstairs. She returned carrying something wrapped in faded cloth. Inside lay a man's gold pocket watch and a small leather pouch. "Jake's," she said simply. "I kept them hidden. There's maybe $200 worth here." Asa stared at the items. "Sarah, I can't—" "Yes, you can." She pressed them into his hands. "He owes me that much at least." They spent the next 3 days driving cattle to market. The buyers, sensing desperation, offered insulting prices. Asa sold anyway, grinding his teeth as his father's carefully bred stock was loaded onto rail cars bound for Chicago's slaughterhouses. 28 years of breeding, gone, he said as the last car pulled away. Sarah slipped her hand into his. "We'll build it again. Better stock, better land." "With what?" The bitterness crept into his voice despite himself. "We're still 400 short, and that's if Pike doesn't find some extra fees." That evening, Asa made his hardest decision yet. He rode to Samuel Hayes's ranch, carrying a small wooden box. "Martha's necklace," Sam said, recognizing the piece. "Asa, you can't be serious." "It's just metal and stones." The lie tasted like ash. Martha had worn that necklace on their wedding day, had been buried wearing it until Asa, in a moment of grief-stricken selfishness, had asked the undertaker to remove it. "She'd understand," Sam said quietly, counting out the bills. Martha always did have a practical streak. With 5 days remaining, they had enough. Barely, but enough. Asa prepared to ride to town when Sarah stopped him at the door. "Let me come with you." "No." He softened the refusal with a kiss. "If Pike tries anything, I don't want you there. And if he has men waiting, if he's planning something, then I'll handle it." He cupped her face. "Trust me, Sarah, please." She nodded reluctantly, but he could see the fear in her eyes. "Come back to me," she whispered. "Always." The town was strangely quiet for a Saturday morning. Asa tied his horse outside the bank, the money in his saddlebags feeling heavier than lead. Inside, Pike sat behind his massive desk, a satisfied smile playing at his lips. "Cutting it close. Callahan. The money's all here." Asa set the bags on the desk. "Count it." Pike made a show of examining each bill, each coin. Finally, he leaned back. "It appears to be sufficient. However, there's the matter of the penalty fee." "What penalty fee?" "For the assault, you did strike me in front of witnesses." Pike's smile widened. $500 seems appropriate compensation. Asa's hands clenched. "That wasn't part of any loan agreement." "No, but it's part of staying out of jail. Sheriff Coleman is prepared to arrest you on assault charges unless we can reach a settlement." The trap was neat, perfectly sprung. Pay the extra fee he didn't have, or go to jail and lose everything anyway. Asa stood frozen, fury and despair warring in his chest. "I'll give you an hour to consider," Pike said, "though I doubt your whore has another 500 hidden in her petticoats." Asa left the bank in a daze. On the street, he nearly collided with Doc Pritchard, who steadied him with a concerned hand. "You all right, son?" "No." The word escaped before Asa could stop it. "No, I'm not." Pritchard studied him, then made a decision. "Come with me." In the doctor's office, Pritchard poured 2 glasses of brandy. "Tell me." Asa found himself spilling the whole story. When he finished, Pritchard was quiet for a long moment. "Pike's had this town in a stranglehold for too long," the doctor said finally. "But he's made enemies. Mrs. Chen's husband, for instance. Pike tried to foreclose on their laundry last year. Walter Schmidt nearly lost his smithy to a similar trick." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that maybe it's time some of us stood up to him." Pritchard opened a drawer, pulling out a leather wallet. "Martha delivered both my grandchildren when my daughter had complications. Never charged us a penny. I'd say that's worth about $200. Wouldn't you?" "Doc, I can't." "You can and you will." Pritchard pressed the money into Asa's hands. "And you're not leaving until a few others have their say." What followed was the most humbling hour of Asa's life. Walter Schmidt contributed $50 for all the horseshoeing work you've sent my way. Misses. Chen appeared with $30 in carefully saved coins. Even Tom Garrett, shamefaced, offered 20 because what Pike's doing ain't right. When they returned to the bank, they weren't alone. Half the town seemed to follow, crowding into the building despite Pike's protests. "Your fee," Asa said, placing the additional money on the desk. "In full." Pike's face went through several shades before settling on a mottled purple. This is conspiracy." "This is community," Doc Pritchard corrected. "Something you've never understood. Horace." With shaking hands, Pike wrote out the receipt. The ranch was safe, the debt cleared. But as Asa turned to leave, Pike's voice stopped him. "Don't think this is over. Callahan, that woman is a poison, and I'll see her gone one way or another." "You'll do nothing," Walter Schmidt said. Stepping forward, the big blacksmith's presence was intimidating. "Any harm comes to Miss Morrison, we'll know where to look." Outside, Asa stood stunned as his neighbors, not all, but enough, offered congratulations and support. It wasn't full acceptance, might never be, but it was a start. He rode home in a daze, finding Sarah pacing the porch. She flew down the steps as he dismounted, searching his face anxiously. "It's done," he said. "The ranch is ours." She threw her arms around him, laughing and crying at once. When he told her about the town's support, she went very still. "They helped us?" "Some did. Doc Pritchard led the charge." He pulled back to look at her. "I think your words at the hearing made more impact than you know." That night, they celebrated quietly with the last bottle of good wine in the cellar. As they sat before the fire, Sarah suddenly stood. "I need to do something," she said. "I'll be right back." She disappeared upstairs, returning with a sheet of paper. "I wrote this last night when I couldn't sleep." She handed it to him. It was a letter, addressed to him. "My dearest Asa," he read aloud. "If you're reading this, it means I've gone. Please don't follow. What we have is precious beyond words, but I won't let it destroy you. You deserve better than a woman who brings only trouble. You deserve peace, respectability, a wife who doesn't make you fight the whole world. I love you enough to give you that chance. Remember me kindly. Your Sarah." Asa's throat tightened. "When were you planning to leave?" "Tonight, if you'd lost the ranch." She knelt before his chair, taking his hands. "I couldn't bear being the reason you lost everything." "Don't you understand yet?" He pulled her up onto his lap, holding her close. "Without you, I have nothing worth keeping." She buried her face in his neck, and he felt her tears against his skin. "I don't deserve you," she whispered. "No," he agreed, making her pull back in surprise. "You deserve better, but I'm hoping you'll settle for me anyway." She kissed him then, fierce and desperate, and he carried her upstairs to their bed. They made love with an intensity born of nearly losing each other, hands and mouths speaking vows that words couldn't capture. Afterward, as Sarah slept curled against him, Asa stared into the darkness and made a decision. Come morning, he'd ride to Carson City and arrange for a marriage license. Pike might make trouble, others might gossip, but Sarah would have the protection of his name and the security of legal standing. In her sleep, Sarah murmured and pressed closer. Asa tightened his arms around her, feeling a peace he hadn't known in years. The ranch was saved, but more importantly, so were they. Together, they'd weather whatever storms came next. The letter lay forgotten on the floor, a testament to a farewell that would never come. In the morning, Asa would burn it, consigning those words to ash. But tonight, he simply held the woman he loved and thanked whatever providence had brought her to his door on that stormy night weeks ago. Outside, snow began to fall, blanketing the valley in pristine white. It covered the scars of drought, the bare patches where cattle had grazed too long, the wounds of a hard year. Come spring, new grass would grow, and with it, new hope. But for now, in the warmth of their bed, Asa and Sarah had everything they needed, each other, and the promise of tomorrow. Sarah woke to find Asa's side of the bed empty, though the sheets still held his warmth. Through the window, she could see him in the barn, already tending to the horses despite the early hour. 3 days had passed since they'd saved the ranch, and a fragile peace had settled over their lives. She dressed quickly and went to start breakfast, humming Martha's melody as she worked. The kitchen felt like home now, every corner familiar, every creak of the floorboards a comfort. When Asa came in, stamping snow from his boots, she had coffee waiting. "You're up early," he said, kissing her cheek. "Couldn't sleep." She poured his coffee, adding the single spoon of sugar he preferred. "Too much quiet. It makes me nervous." He understood. After weeks of crisis, the calm felt unnatural, like the held breath before a storm. But as days passed without incident, they began to relax into something approaching normal life. A week later, Asa returned from town with a marriage license and a grin. "Judge Morrison, no relation, will marry us next Saturday. Unless you'd prefer to wait for something fancier?" "Saturday's perfect," Sarah said, then laughed. "Though I don't have a proper dress. Wear the blue one. You were wearing it the night you arrived." He pulled her close. "Seems fitting to start our marriage in the dress that brought you to me." The ceremony was simple, witnessed by Doc Pritchard and his wife. Sarah's hands trembled as she spoke her vows, but her voice was clear and certain when Judge Morrison pronounced them husband and wife. Asa kissed her with a tenderness that made Mrs. Pritchard dab at her eyes. "Don't expect the whole town to celebrate," the judge warned as they signed the papers. "But for what it's worth, I think you two will do just fine." They returned to the ranch as snow began falling again, transforming the world into something clean and new. That night, as Sarah lit the lamps, she paused by the window. "We should visit Martha's grave," she said quietly. Together. Asa was surprised by the suggestion, but he recognized the wisdom in it. The next morning, they rode to the small cemetery on the hill overlooking the valley. Martha's headstone was simple: "Beloved wife, 1,862 to 1,886 inches." Sarah knelt in the snow, placing a small bouquet of dried wildflowers she'd saved from autumn. "Thank you," she whispered to the stone, "for loving him first, for making him the man who could love again." Asa's throat tightened. He helped Sarah to her feet, and they stood together in the quiet cemetery, past and present somehow reconciled in that moment of grace. As winter deepened, Sarah threw herself into improving the ranch. She had a gift for making do with little, transforming the bare house into something warmer. Curtains appeared at windows, made from fabric scraps traded for eggs in town. She convinced Asa to move some furniture, opening up the parlor to catch more light. "You're nesting," he teased one evening, watching her rearrange the bookshelf for the third time. She paused, a strange expression crossing her face. "Maybe I am." The realization hit them both simultaneously. Sarah's hand went to her belly, and Asa crossed the room in 2 strides. "Are you? I don't know. Maybe. I've been tired, and my monthly time is late, but—" She bit her lip. "I've been late before. The last times, with Jake. This is different," Asa said firmly. "Everything about us is different." They decided to wait, to be certain before hoping too hard. But Asa caught Sarah sometimes with her hand on her stomach, a wondering look on her face. He found himself planning additions to the house, imagining a child with Sarah's eyes and his stubborn chin. 2 weeks later, Doc Pritchard confirmed their hopes. "About 2 months along, I'd say you'll have a summer baby." Sarah gripped Asa's hand so tightly he thought his bones might break. After the doctor left, she burst into tears. "What if something goes wrong? What if I lose this one too?" "Then we'll face it together," Asa said, gathering her close. "But Sarah, what if everything goes right?" Spring came slowly that year, but when it arrived, it transformed the valley. The new water source from the mountain springs fed the land, and green grass sprouted where only dust had been. Asa bought new cattle with careful economy, building the herd slowly but surely. Sarah's pregnancy progressed without complication, though she remained anxious. She took to visiting Mrs. Chen, who had borne 6 healthy children and offered practical advice along with friendship. Other women began to nod to her in town, and while not all were friendly, the open hostility had faded. One afternoon in May, Sarah was tending the garden when she heard horses approaching. Her blood chilled as she recognized Horace Pike, accompanied by 2 rough-looking men. "Mrs. Callahan," Pike said with mock politeness. "Or should I say Mrs. Morrison? I've had some interesting correspondence from Carson City." Sarah stood slowly, one hand protectively over her rounded belly. "My name is Sarah Callahan. What do you want?" "Just to inform you that certain irregularities have come to light regarding your first husband's death. Seems there are questions about whether his shooting was truly justified. That matter was investigated and closed by your cousin." Pike smiled coldly. "But the new witnesses have come forward. Men who say Jake Morrison was unarmed when he died." Sarah felt the blood drain from her face. "That's a lie." "Perhaps, but lies have a way of becoming truth when the right people believe them." Pike leaned forward in his saddle. "Leave. Tonight. Disappear. And these witnesses disappear too. Stay, and your husband will watch you hang for murder." After they rode away, Sarah sank to her knees in the dirt, shaking. That's how Asa found her an hour later when he returned from checking the cattle. "Sarah!" He was off his horse in an instant, gathering her into his arms. "What happened? Is it the baby?" "Pike," she managed. "He says he has witnesses. About Jake. Says they'll testify I murdered him." Asa's face went dark with fury, but his hands remained gentle as he helped her to the house. Once she'd told him everything. He paced the kitchen like a caged wolf. "He's bluffing. Has to be. What if he's not?" Sarah clutched her belly. "What if they arrest me? What happens to our child if I'm in jail? Or worse?" "That's not going to happen." Asa knelt before her chair, taking her hands. "We'll fight this. Get a real lawyer from Carson City. Hell, from San Francisco if we need to. With what money? We'll find it." His jaw set stubbornly. "I'll sell the ranch if I have to." "No." Sarah pulled free, standing abruptly. "I won't let you lose everything because of my past. Pike wins either way." "Then we leave. Tonight. Pack what we can carry and ride for California." Sarah touched his face gently. "And spend our lives running? Looking over our shoulders? What kind of life is that for our child?" They argued long into the night, neither willing to yield. Finally, exhausted, they lay in bed holding each other as if the world might tear them apart come morning. "I'm not going to lose you," Asa whispered fiercely. "Not to Pike, not to the past, not to anything." Sarah pressed closer, feeling the baby move between them. "I love you," she said simply. "Whatever comes, remember that." In the morning, they would have to decide, fight or flee, stand or run. But for these last hours of darkness, they had each other, and the small life growing between them, and a love that had survived so much already. Outside, an owl called across the valley, its voice carrying on the wind like a question without an answer. Sarah closed her eyes and prayed, not for herself, but for Asa, for their child, for the strength to face whatever dawn would bring. The night stretched on, precious and terrible, while 2 hearts beat as one against the gathering storm. Dawn broke clear and bright, painting the mountains in shades of gold and rose. Sarah stood at the window, watching the sun climb higher, her hand resting on her swollen belly. The baby kicked, as if sensing her turmoil. "We're not running," Asa said from behind her. His voice was calm, decided. "This is our home. We'll face whatever comes." She turned to find him dressed in his best clothes, the ones he'd worn to their wedding. "What are you doing?" "Going to town. Time to end this, one way or another." "Asa, no." "Trust me," he said, kissing her gently. "Just trust me." He was gone before she could protest further. Sarah spent the morning in an agony of waiting, trying to busy herself with chores but jumping at every sound. When she heard horses approaching near noon, her heart nearly stopped. But it wasn't Asa alone. Doc Pritchard was with him, along with Sheriff Coleman and a man Sarah didn't recognize. a distinguished gentleman in a city suit. "Mrs. Callahan," the stranger said, tipping his hat. "I'm James Thornfield, attorney at law. Your husband has retained my services." Sarah looked at Asa in confusion. "How?" "Doc Pritchard made some introductions." Asa explained. "Turns out Mr. Thornfield here has been looking into Pike's business practices for some time." "Indeed," Thornfield said, producing a leather portfolio. "Mr. Pike has made many enemies over the years. Several have been quite forthcoming about his methods, including bribing witnesses and falsifying documents." Sheriff Coleman shifted uncomfortably. "I've been reviewing the Morrison case file. The witnesses Pike claims to have, 2 are men with outstanding warrants, and the 3rd died in a saloon fight 6 months ago." "He was bluffing," Sarah breathed. "More than that," Thornfield continued. "He was attempting extortion. A serious crime. I've already filed papers with the territorial court. Mr. Pike will be facing his own legal troubles soon enough." The relief was so overwhelming that Sarah swayed on her feet. Asa caught her, guiding her to a chair while Doc Pritchard checked her pulse. "The baby?" Asa asked anxiously. "Is fine," Pritchard assured him. "Strong heartbeat, though I'd recommend rest for the mother." After the men left, with promises to keep them informed of developments, Asa and Sarah sat together in the quiet kitchen. "How did you pay for the lawyer?" Sarah asked. "I didn't. He's working on contingency. If he can prove Pike's other frauds, he'll collect from those settlements." Asa took her hands. "Sometimes, Sarah, you have to have faith that good people will stand up to evil." News of Pike's arrest came 2 days later. The banker had tried to flee but was caught at the stage station. As word spread, more victims came forward. The territory attorney predicted Pike would spend years in prison. "It's over," Sarah marveled that evening. "It's really over." "No," Asa corrected, pulling her close. "It's just beginning." Summer arrived in full glory, painting the valley in 100 shades of green. The ranch thrived under their combined care. Sarah's garden produced abundantly, and she began trading vegetables for goods in town. More women nodded to her now, some even stopping to ask about her pregnancy. On a sweltering July afternoon, Sarah felt the first pains. Asa rode hard for Mrs. Pritchard while Sarah tried to stay calm. The labor was long but uncomplicated. As dawn broke the next day, the sound of a baby's cry filled the house. "A daughter, Mrs. Pritchard announced, placing the squalling infant in Sarah's arms. "Healthy and perfect?" Sarah wept as she looked down at the tiny face, the shock of dark hair. "She's real. She's here." Asa touched his daughter's cheek with one trembling finger. "What should we call her?" Sarah didn't hesitate. "Hope, Hope, Martha Callahan." "Hope," Asa repeated, and the name was a promise. The baby thrived, growing round and cheerful. Sarah bloomed into motherhood, her earlier fears replaced by quiet confidence. The ranch prospered as well. The water from the mountain springs proved even more abundant than expected, allowing them to expand the gardens and support more cattle. Visitors came more frequently now. Mrs. Chen brought tiny embroidered clothes for Hope. Walter Schmidt forged a decorative weather vane as a birth gift. Even Tom Garrett's wife stopped by with a quilt, mumbling an apology for past unkindness. "You've given them something to believe in," Doc Pritchard observed during one of his visits. "Proof that people can change, that second chances are possible." One evening, as autumn touched the valley with gold, Sarah found an envelope slipped under the door. Inside was a photograph, a family portrait taken years ago, and a letter in shaky handwriting. "My name is Clara Morrison," she read aloud to Asa. "I am Jake's sister. I heard about his death and about you. I want you to know I don't blame you. Jake was cruel even as a boy. I'm glad you found happiness. The photograph is of our mother. Perhaps your daughter might like to know where she comes from, at least the good parts." Sarah touched the face of the woman in the photograph. Kind eyes, a gentle smile. Nothing like Jake at all. "You'll tell Hope about her. When she's older, Asa asked. I'll tell her everything, Sarah decided. The darkness and the light, but mostly, I'll tell her about choosing love over fear. Winter came gently that year, the snow falling in fat, lazy flakes. The house was warm and filled with laughter. Hope had her mother's eyes and her father's stubborn chin, and she ruled the household with tiny fists and gurgling smiles. On Christmas Eve, they hosted a small gathering. The Pritchards, the Chens, the Schmidts, and even Samuel Hayes and his family. The house rang with conversation in multiple languages, with children playing and adults sharing food and stories. Look at this, Sarah whispered to Asa as they stood in the doorway, watching their guests. A year ago, I was an outcast. Now you're home, Asa finished. We're home. As the new year dawned, Sarah began receiving letters. Women in difficult situations, having heard her story, wrote asking for advice or help. With Asa's support, she started writing back, offering what wisdom she could. Sometimes, she and Mrs. Pritchard would travel to nearby towns, helping women escape dangerous situations or start new lives. The widow's helper, one grateful woman called her, and the name stuck. The ranch became an occasional way station for women needing temporary shelter. Asa built an addition to the house, creating space for those who needed it. Hope grew up surrounded by stories of resilience and renewal. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Asa and Sarah stood on the porch, watching the sunset paint the valley in brilliant hues. Hope played at their feet, chattering to a rag doll in the mysterious language of 4-year-olds. Sarah's hand rested on her belly, where another child grew. No regrets? Asa asked, as he did every anniversary. None, Sarah replied, as she always did. You? Just one, he said, making her look at him in surprise. I regret it took a storm to bring you to my door. I would have preferred to find you sooner. She laughed, the sound carrying across the valley like music. Then we wouldn't have this story to tell. True enough, he agreed, pulling her close. As stars began to appear in the darkening sky, they stood together. A family forged from loss and loneliness, tempered by trials, and made strong by love. The ranch spread before them, no longer dying but vibrantly alive, just like the love that had saved them both. In the distance, a coyote called, but it no longer sounded mournful. Instead, it seemed to speak of wild freedom, of survival against odds, of life continuing despite all hardships. Sarah smiled, recognizing a kindred spirit. Come inside, she said, taking Asa's hand. It's getting cold. They gathered Hope and went in together, closing the door against the night. Inside was warmth and light and love. Everything they had almost lost, everything they had fought to keep, everything they had found in each other. The widow's midnight plea had led them both to salvation, through a forbidden furnace of trial that had refined them into something precious and enduring. Their love story, born in desperation and forged in adversity, had become a testament to the power of second chances and the courage to choose love over fear. In the years to come, their story would be told throughout the valley and beyond, a reminder that even in the harshest landscape, love could bloom like wildflowers after rain, beautiful and resilient and absolutely impossible to stop. Thank you so much for listening to this story of love and redemption in the Old West. I hope Asa and Sarah's journey touched your heart as much as it did mine. Where are you listening from today? I'd love to hear from listeners around the world. Drop a comment and let me know. If you enjoyed this tale of forbidden love and second chances, please subscribe to Wild West Campfire for more stories that bring the American frontier to life. What did you think about Sarah and Asa's story? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Until next time, partners, keep the campfire burning and the stories flowing.